It's time for 515 Fantasy Football.
I know football. Are you ready for some football?
Domination on Sundays begins with listening to these guys on Thursdays.
You ready for this?
Over 40 years of fantasy football experience between them.
Yeah!
One is a proud veteran of the United States Marine Corps, husband and father, entering his 18th year of fantasy competition. Brian Eikenberry. The other, also a proud husband and father, is one of the winningest fantasy minds in the state. Celebrating 24 years of excellence. Andy Hall.
Let's get the game on!
It's showtime. The 515 Fantasy Football Show with your hosts, Andy Hall and Brian Eikenberry.
Well, here we are. Wrapped up another season, Mr. Brian Eikenberry.
Giddy up.
I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. The season wrap-up show, our second annual on the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Heard on Thursdays on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa, our radio home. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. No championships between the two of us this season.
Oh, just eat it,
So
man.
painful.
Just suck. Are you freaking kidding me?
I don't know what's worse, though. Being a number one seed in two different leagues,
Yeah.
having a bye week,
Both were bye weeks.
and then you lose.
My guys had too much rest.
You didn't even get to a championship
I
game.
did not even sniff the round.
Brian, I don't know if that's worse or my situation when I had really good teams that were decimated by injury all season long and pretty much torpedoed me.
Yeah, it was just garbage all around, and I was very sad. I mean, I was even talking smack. Bad, man. I was talking to everybody. Number one seeds, man. I was coming in on hot streaks. Just my term was coming in like a wrecking ball, man. I was Miley Cyrus banging the walls of that thing, and it was touchdowns, man. None of my people scored touchdowns. None.
Throughout the course of this show, we're going to revisit why things like that happened. We're going to go position by position here in the first few segments of this wrap-up show and break them down and kind of assess, what went right, what went wrong, what we learned. And before we do all of that, I want to invite you all, as this will be the last program until August. We have some downtime here, obviously, so there won't be a
pending
show.
surprises.
Well,
pending surprises.
You and your surprises. You've gotten people so fired up on Twitter.
I do.
By the way, this is when I was going to invite everybody to our social media. 515 Fantasy Football. We are on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Feel free to like us there. You can contact us anytime, Brian or myself. We are also on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. I am at Andy Hall Radio. He is at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. And he has gotten people all sorts of riled up over this quote-unquote secret thing.
And it's going to be awesome, and it may include an adult sleepover.
See, now, why you got to tell people that? Now our listenership went from several thousand down to probably about 2.
Well, those 2 are interested in my sleepover, so.
Well, those 2 were probably in the midst of eating a bowl of cereal and didn't exactly hear you when you said that. They were crunching.
Could be.
They were in the midst of the crunch, so they didn't quite catch that, and that's probably a good thing.
Hey,
for us.
we have lots of surprises and secrets to reveal. At somewhere in this episode, when the conversation dips, I'm going to leak them out like the hot brown rain.
I'm as on the edge of my seat as you are, folks. I have no idea what this man is talking about, but we'll soon find out, apparently. Brian, let's start at the quarterback position. And typical leagues, typical scoring, so let's say 5-point passing touchdowns, let's say a point per each 20 yards passing, a point per each 10 yards rushing, 6-point touchdown runs. That's sort of your quarterback scoring for this. The number one quarterback in all of fantasy this season under that scoring format was Aaron Rodgers. Second time in 3 years, Aaron Rodgers is your top scoring quarterback in all of fantasy football. I want to say we sort of saw this coming. I don't know that we saw him being the number one scoring quarterback, though.
No, and looking at some stats, he had a lot of rushing yards. And a lot of rushing touchdowns this year.
He does, though. I mean, I think this happened back in 2014 as well. He finished this season with 454.4 fantasy points, an average of 28.4 per week. Back in 2014 when he led the league as well, 435.6. So, I mean, we're talking about a difference here of less than 20 fantasy points. And I think, again, that's probably a byproduct of a pretty good passing year for him and an above-average rushing year where he is scoring those touchdowns, Brian.
Yeah, and I'm pulling up the numbers right now to see exactly what his rushing touchdowns was. But his back was against the wall this year, and he had no excuse, lost the running game, so it just made him more aggressive. And a more aggressive Aaron Rodgers is not good if you're the opposing team.
Well, it's interesting how that Packers started the season, and Aaron really wasn't himself, and we had the same conversation we seem to have almost every year with him early on. What's wrong with Aaron Rodgers? And then by the time you know it, you turn your head around, and he's killing him. He's just absolutely killing him. So he actually outscored Cam Newton's 2015, which is quite impressive.
Yeah, he had 369 rushing yards and 4 rushing touchdowns.
There you go. Yeah, I'd say that's definitely above average for quarterbacks. Number 2 scoring quarterback just behind Aaron Rodgers at 428.5 was Matt Ryan. And now this was one that I think most people would say they were surprised by.
You mean the 2016 MVP, Matt Ryan?
You really think it's going to be him? Because it could be Aaron Rodgers. It could be Ezekiel Elliott.
Here's the thing. If you go back and you listen to me about 5 weeks ago, I said Aaron Rodgers and this BS fake injury calf stuff.
I remember this.
He's just talking. This is how he's going to win the MVP because he did it in 2014. It was, he's got a bad leg injury. Oh, my God. They won out and they made the playoffs as a champion. Oh, my God, they did it. And the injury was complete garbage, and he got the MVP. I said 5 weeks ago this is what's going to happen. But I think Matt Ryan is far more deserving of the MVP trophy.
What I'll say is most people that I've seen out there are predicting Atlanta in the Super Bowl this year.
I would, given history not being on their side and their habit of laying complete stinkers in the playoffs.
It's been since the Dirty Bird back in '98.
Give me Vic.
When they broke my heart. The Vikings that year were supposed to be the Super Bowl champions. That did not happen. Matt Ryan had an absolutely phenomenal season. Absolutely should be in the conversation for MVP. Story closed on that. Back about 25 points or so is Drew Brees, number 3 fantasy scoring quarterback this season. And, what can you say about Drew Brees? Everybody is always so quick to try to write him off prior to the season.
5,200 yards.
Another 5,000-yard passing season.
He has 4 5,000-yard seasons, which is more than all of the other active NFL QBs combined.
It's amazing. And why we keep doubting him, I have no idea. I will continue, as I did this year, to have him ranked up in the top 5 at quarterbacks.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. So Drew Brees had 3 bad games. There were 2 games where he didn't throw a single touchdown. He still had 5,200 yards, 37 touchdowns.
Isn't that amazing?
So give him just average numbers, and he just threw up the best season in NFL history.
I mean, you'd think he would have missed Jimmy Graham. Jimmy who?
Yeah.
Hey, you still got Brandon Cooks. You got this phenomenal rookie, this electric rookie, Michael Thomas, who, by the way, going to be a borderline first, early second-round pick next season.
There's going to be
you have Willie Snead still in the mix. You've got
Kobe
Fleener there. You've got a decent running game, a lot of options.
Well, and I think that's what helped them out a lot is when they discovered they could use Hightower in different ways. It pulled an extra person down in the box where he was able to throw the ball again.
Separated by only about 1 point, 1 fantasy point. Andrew Luck and Kirk Cousins at 4 and 5 at the quarterback positions. Luck, I'm not so surprised by. Cousins in the top 5 is kind of surprising, is it not?
Yeah, it is, because everyone was talking about how he was not deserving of a large contract from the Redskins. But you throw up 4,900 yards, you're going to get yourself a pretty fat contract.
At 6 and 7, and these two only separated by about 3 fantasy points. Dak Prescott at 6, Matthew Stafford at 7. Another guy in Matthew Stafford that folks were writing off and had ranked in some places I saw outside the top 20 at the quarterback position going into this season.
Never.
It was the loss of Calvin Johnson.
Yeah, absolutely.
We didn't buy it. You and I didn't buy it.
No, not at all.
But I heard a lot of fantasy experts thought Matthew Stafford was pretty much over, and that wasn't the case.
No. It was just me being a homer for most people, but look, it made him progress, and I followed them pretty heavily, and I knew it wasn't going to change. That's why I drafted him.
At 8, Derek Carr, 329.8. Boy, what could have been the Oakland Raiders season had that injury not happened. Now I think that team is in serious trouble heading into the playoffs. Tom Brady at number 9, and of course Tom missed some time due to Deflategate. He came in at 325.6. Coming in 5 points less than that at number 10 is Russell Wilson of Seattle. Phillip Rivers, Mr. Consistent, finished at the exact same spot he did last year, number 11. He scored 313.1 as opposed to 348.4. Quarterbacks were down overall this season, I come to find. And number 12 was Cincinnati's Andy Dalton at 312.7. A breakdown of the quarterback position. Up next, though, Brian and I are going to dive right into running backs. And, the trend this year in fantasy drafts was to go heavy on wide receivers and pass catchers and specialty guys. And so you kind of forgot about running backs. Well, guess what? 2016, a very strong year for the running back position. And I have a feeling going into drafts next year, it's going to be a lot of running backs taken early. Stick around. We'll break down the running backs next. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. The season wrap-up show. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. Want to say before we go any further how much we appreciate those of you that have stuck with us all season. Started the show back in early August, did several preseason shows leading up to your fantasy drafts. A lot of great intel, I think, we offered early on. If you look at the way things shook down, there weren't a ton of surprises from our standpoint. We kind of alluded to that when we did the quarterback breakdowns just a bit ago.
Yeah, and it goes to in-depth research, trend watching, and knowing both sides of the ball, offense and defense, and scheming, and all the other good little nuggets that you don't get out there because we're not afraid to make the calls.
Yes, that is indeed the case. We invite you to like us on Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He's at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. I also want to say thanks to our good friends at the Sleeper Bot app and the Sleeper Wire crew for allowing us to team up with them this season and, be a part of what they've got going on there. I'm very excited for the future in terms of that relationship.
Yeah, it was a fun little exercise. We really hadn't kind of branched out into a rapid-fire kind of question and answer, and it was fun. It was a good exercise every week. I mean, we had 90 minutes of just rapid-fire questions and answering them as fast as we can just off the top of our heads and, doing 400 or 500 questions in 90 minutes between two people was pretty stupid, actually.
I love the fact that somebody that rated and reviewed our show on iTunes pointed out the fact that one of our goals on the show, and I'm glad this cuts through to the listeners, one of our goal is to be in communication with you. If you take the time and invest your time, which I know how valuable everybody's time is, you take time out to write us or tweet at us or ask a simple question on Facebook or whatever. You reach out, we respond. That's sort of the deal, and I'm glad somebody actually noticed that and put it in the review.
And that response may be getting invited to an adult sleepover.
just so weird. Let it go, Brian. Let it go. All right, so let's do the running back position, a thorough breakdown here of the top 12. And again, there were some surprises.
Some?
More, yeah, but it was more in terms of who the busts were. I don't think that the players that are up near the top here surprised me all that much. David Johnson finishing at number 1 at the running back position is not a huge shock to me.
No.
365.8 points. Now that is impressive. I mean, that's up there with the top quarterback scoring in fantasy football.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is all, by the way, half PPR scoring. So when I say 365.8, that's approximately what you should have got out of him if you're in a half PPR league this year. David Johnson had just a phenomenal year, not just running the ball, but boy, receptions, yardage, touchdowns through the air. I mean, he was the only guy that, you could count on. Carson Palmer anyway, was David Johnson.
Yeah, I do have a little concern, not much, a little concern going forward. He's still going to produce, he's still good, but I don't think he's going to be able to maintain those levels, and not because of ability, It's going to be what happens with the quarterback position and then possibly the year after the coaching position.
It's funny, didn't we just have this conversation last week, Brian, where in the pop quiz, I asked you who's the consensus number one next year? Is it David Johnson? Is it Ezekiel Elliott? Or is it Le'Veon Bell? And my answer was Le'Veon Bell at the time because, I mean, listen, he's up there in receptions. He's got, he's third in fantasy points between the three of them, but let's face it, he missed the first few games of the season. David Johnson, for all intents and purposes, was healthy most of the year and played these games, and, there's a reason why he's sitting up at number one. But yes, there are so many things at play here, including that quarterback position in Arizona. What will they do? Will they end up signing a free agent perhaps to replace Carson Palmer? Nobody knows at this point, but we got to keep our eye on it.
Technically, Bell didn't play 4 games because he sat week 17.
Yeah, that's true. Speaking of Bell, he's down at number 3. We're going to hit Ezekiel Elliott first, though. He finished number 2 at the running back position. Brian, I know you were all in from the very beginning on Ezekiel Elliott.
Yep, absolutely. He was one of the very few top draft picks who was walking into a great situation. And that just had dollar signs written all over it.
Didn't you just know at the NFL draft back in, late April, all of a sudden the Cowboys pick comes up at number 4.
And you're like, yep.
Ezekiel Elliott?
Yep.
Really?
Yep.
Wow.
When you see someone trade up that high, they're going for broke. And
something else.
It just a jackpot.
Now, to give you an idea of just how massive David Johnson's season was, Ezekiel Elliott lands at number 2 at 311.4. That's approximately 54.4 fantasy points behind the leader at the running back position. That's a lot.
That's a ton.
That is a lot.
From 1 to 2, that's huge.
Le'Veon Bell, we mentioned, he missed several games this season, the suspension at the beginning of the season, and, of course, Brian alluded to the Week 17 sitting as well because Pittsburgh had their playoff seed sort of locked up. He finished third at 278.9. Now, I'm still will make an argument that he could be the number 1 pick, and you'd feel pretty good about that pick next season.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why somebody would just be like, what did you just do? Because then Antonio Brown could be number 2 right behind it.
He could be. I mean, that's one of the reasons, though, is I love the skill position players around him. That Pittsburgh offense is awesome.
Yeah.
If there's one team in the AFC I think could really honestly give New England a run, it's probably Pittsburgh. I say that about the Chiefs. I mean, that's coming from my heart. I really want Kansas City to be that team. And they do have the weapons, but not to the extent Pittsburgh does. And so there's a reason why I think Le'Veon Bell is in it for the long haul. I mean, we saw what he did back in 2014. He was the number 1 scoring fantasy football player at the running back position. So
we'll see what happens come contract time.
That's another interesting point. LaShawn McCoy finished at number 4. Boy, in the league I just joined that you commish, I could have kept LaShawn McCoy. I debated it. I actually thought about it.
The guy who had him was trying to trade him for the first 5 weeks, and nobody was biting. And I look back and just go, God, why didn't I pull the trigger?
Just amazing, right? It's one of those players that, you might have had an opportunity at, and you're kicking yourself for not taking the chance, considering the type of offense that he works within and his workload amount. I mean, it's just a matter of staying healthy with LaShawn McCoy. And sure, there's some risk there, but finishing at 274.8, only 4 points behind Le'Veon Bell. A very impressive season for LaShawn McCoy. Demarco Murray at number 5, 268.6. Now, a lot of that was scored in the first 10, 11 weeks of the season. I look at Demarco Murray as a huge disappointment in the final 6 weeks of the season. Huge disappointment.
Yeah, he scorned a lot of owners in that time frame and quite possibly screwed him over. But that's just the way it is. You're playing an old player. At some point, it's got to stop, and it just stopped a little too early for fantasy owners.
Saw some shades of 2014 there for the first, like I said, 9-10 weeks of the season. Then they started working the rookie Derrick Henry in a little bit more, and some of those touches inside the one got vultured, and before you know it, DeMarco Murray was scoring single-digit points in the final 6-7 weeks of the season. Just, so bad. Number 6 was Devonte Freeman, a guy that a lot of people were down on this year going into the year. I was not. I saw what he did last year and thought he's perfectly capable of nearly matching it, and he did. He was only 20 points behind what he finished at last year as the number 1 scoring fantasy running back.
Yeah, I think Devonte Freeman this year, I think what he did differently than last year is last year it was the bulk of his points were all in about 6 games.
Yeah, that's true.
This year it was more of a healthy spread, and even the beginning of the season, people were selling Devonte Freeman because the Tevin Coleman split early on that had a lot of people guessing, and then that kind of got blown out of the water after week 5, and away he went.
And part of that, too, is Tevin Coleman's health. When Tevin Coleman's out, it's all Devonte Freeman all the time. So he benefited from that most certainly and finished at number 6 at the running back position in half PPR. At number 7, I'm going to go ahead and beat my chest a little bit here, Brian, because this was perhaps my biggest call of the year going back to the preseason was Legarrette Blunt. The amount of scoring Legarrette Blunt did this season. He led the league in touchdowns. Had some pretty nice yardage games. Didn't light the world on fire in that category, but when you're scoring that many touchdowns, man,
doesn't matter.
He's winning some games for you week after week. He finished at 228.4, so a considerable drop-off in fantasy production from number 6, Devonte Freeman, at 257.1. But, I mean, still, he's a top 10 back. I said he'd score more than 10 touchdowns. I think you were shaking your head at me at the time.
Yeah, I was shaking your head at the time, but I was also the guy that drafted him in the 7th round.
Yeah.
Just saying, yeah, what the heck, let's pull Blunt and see what happens. And people were giving me crap. Oh, what, are you kidding me? You're only going to use him for 4 weeks. Newsflash, Legarrette Blunt didn't get 10 points like 2 games this season. That was it.
The comeback player of the year at the running back position finished number 8. That was San Diego's Melvin Gordon, 228.1. What a season for Melvin Gordon. A lot of touchdowns.
Well, we've seen it in the preseason. And in the preseason, he was having – there was one game I remember we were watching at a draft. He just ripped one off for like 80 and a touchdown, and then the next possession, he had another touchdown. It's like he's had 5 carries for 80 yards and 2 touchdowns. Yeah, I'm pulling the trigger on this guy.
And benefited greatly from an injury to Danny Woodhead early in the season.
That helped as well, but it was just inevitable before the Chargers realized it.
In at number 9 was Mark Ingram of the Saints, a guy I will never draft, I will never own. I simply do not trust him. Hey, he's a top 10 back in fantasy football this year, 218.2. And, oh, by the way, he finished number 12 last year. So, I mean, at least there's a bit of consistency there. He's been a running back 2 years in a row. I don't know if it's the Saints offense or Mark Ingram specifically that I don't trust, but I never find myself drafting.
He's got a good
guy.
Backup, and that's what's risky about it.
Tim Hightower.
Yep.
There's also Traveris Cadet there. There's John Kuhn now vulturing touchdowns inside the 1. They even had Kobe Fleener run one in earlier this season. So, I don't know. Confounding to say the least. Number 10 was Jordan Howard. Boy, I'd love to spend some time on Jordan Howard.
Whoops.
I don't think anybody saw that. I mean,
No.
Jeremy Langford was the expected back there in Chicago. And then he got hurt, and Jordan Howard, the talented rookie, got his shot. And boy, did he run with it.
He did not look back one bit.
Not at all. He is the guy now, and probably in the conversation for a first-round draft pick next season because of what he did this year at 214.6 fantasy points in half PPR. Rounding out the top 12, Jay Ajayi, who was the benefactor of 3 massive games this season behind that Dolphins offensive line. 3 200-yard games and multiple touchdowns in those games as well. Finished at 201.8. See his workload going up next season as well. And the Highlander himself, Frank Gore, finished at number 12. How about that? Frank Gore at 194.3 was a running back 1.
Insane.
This season.
So I have a trivia question for you.
Got about 45 seconds.
Perfect. What person has more than 20 rushes and has the highest average yards per carry?
Per average carry.
Yeah, yards per carry. Over 20 carries, who has the highest yards per carry?
I mean, I guess I would say somebody like a Melvin Gordon, maybe. I don't know.
Nope, Tyreek Hill.
Oh, Tyreek Hill.
24 carries, he averaged 11.1 yards per carry, 3 touchdowns.
It's tough. We don't quite know how to classify him yet. He's technically a wide receiver, but they used him as more of a running
nuts,
back.
Man, it's crazy.
They used him as more of a running back. Anyway, we'll get to wide receivers here in just a bit. Make Tyreek Hill part of that conversation, certainly. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. We do hope you'll stick around. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday on 1350 AM, ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eichenberry. This is the season recap show, going position by position and breaking down each of the top 12 at these positions in half PPR leagues. About to get into wide receivers, but first, let's have a little conversation, Brian, about how big wide receivers were in the 2016 fantasy drafts. Everybody was going wide receiver early.
Yeah, I pulled 5 straight.
You did
Like a boss.
in that league. You
Like
did.
a boss.
Including one other pass catcher, Rob Gronkowski, which didn't quite work out.
But I had a deep draft.
You did. But my point in all of this is the fact that everybody zigged when they should have zagged this season.
Yeah, totally.
We come to find out that this was actually a big-time down year for wide receivers. You look at the top spot here, and Antonio Brown has been number 1 2 years running and has scored well over 300 fantasy points in half PPR. The leader at the wide receiver position this season, 256.1. Now, that's a pretty significant drop.
Yeah, it is.
Do you know who finished number 1 at the wide receiver position?
In a half-point PPR.
You don't know the answer, do you?
Half-point PPR, I'm going to say OBJ.
It was Mike Evans.
Mike Evans.
Which I called several weeks ago. Said Mike Evans. It was the halfway point, actually,
yeah, because
wasn't it?
his touchdowns, man.
And plus the number of targets that guy got and brought in a bunch of those passes, a bunch of those receptions. He was the only game in town, and did score a ton of touchdowns. In fact, he was one of the most bankable wide receivers there was all season long and stayed relatively healthy throughout.
Yep,
So
absolutely.
Mike Evans finishes as your number 1 wide receiver. Who do you suppose finished at number 2?
I'm going to guess either Antonio Brown or OBJ.
Just 0.8 points behind Mike Evans in half PPR. Antonio Brown could have made it 3 years in a row.
Yeah, he missed a game. So there's that.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Week 17.
Well, yeah. So there's 80 yards in 5 catches.
Yeah.
So there's that. But he also had he was without Big Ben for a week.
Yes, he was.
But hey, you know what? They had a tight end situation that was kind of emerging in Pittsburgh there for a little bit. It's okay. Antonio Brown's still a boss.
He, to me, is easily the most bankable wide receiver there is.
Guaranteed.
You do not take anybody but Antonio Brown first if you're going wide receiver in your drafts, even coming up here in 2017. He is the guy and missed out on being the top spot 3 years running by less than 1 full fantasy point. So there you have it. At number 3, this will surprise some folks. It certainly surprised us. Jordy Nelson, 255.2, just 0.1 points behind Antonio Brown. So here's another guy that was vying for the number 1 spot, Jordy Nelson, and this was a byproduct of all those touchdowns.
Yeah, these last 6 weeks, man, they've really cranked it up, and I think he's got 8 touchdowns in 6 weeks, something like that. Something crazy because he's got 14 total.
Coming off of a season that he had to sit out and came off of major, surgery.
Yeah.
It's pretty impressive to see a guy of his age come out and do what he did in 2016. He did the almost exact same thing in 2014, his last healthy season, where he scored 283.9 and finished at the same exact spot, number 3 at the wide receiver position. So Jordy Nelson is a guy that a lot of people will try to start to fade next season, and I think will end up being a nice surprise for most people that draft him. Odell Beckham comes in at number 4 with 248.1. Another guy that you could make an argument for at the number 1 spot at wide receiver in drafts next season. I think if I'm going into a draft, I'm considering Brown definitely as the first receiver taken. And then I think I go Beckham and then Evans for me personally. How about you?
Yeah, here's the thing. The top 4 or 5, I don't think you can pick wrong. Ultimately.
Even Nelson, like if you considered him top 5, I think there's enough risk there where I would consider Nelson out of the top 5.
Well, I think Jordy just proved to you that there is no risk.
Maybe he did.
I think that's what just happened because that's why I was gun shy. I'm like, that's a bad surgery to come back from. I don't want to mess with it. But he just proved to you, no, it's not an issue. Don't worry.
Okay. So you think even if you go like T.Y. Hilton, for example, T.Y. Hilton finished number 5 this year at fantasy.
T.Y. Hilton just proved again. He was highest in yards this year. He just proved that it doesn't matter who's around me or what's happening. I'm still T.Y. freaking Hilton. And he even played injured for 2 of those games.
He is, if not he's one of just a few guys who opposing corners will always name as one of the toughest guys to try to defend.
Mm-hmm.
Corners have a hell of a time trying to slow down T.Y. Hilton. And he's a real weapon. He finished number 5 this season, right out in front of Julio Jones, who came in at number 6. I think Julio Jones had a couple of just absolutely monster games this season that sort of propelled him to this spot, but he had enough down weeks where he probably sank some fantasy fortunes this season.
He had 300 yards in one game, and then he'd have 27 yards. I think the thing that killed him the most and the owners the most is that he only had 6 touchdowns.
That is true. Coming in at number 7, just 9 points behind Julio Jones, the Saints' Brandon Cooks.
That's one where you kind of raise your eyebrow and you go, huh?
Yeah. Where did that come from, right?
Right.
But I think he's another case where, he would have really, really big weeks, and then there were other weeks where he'd have, 2 catches for 32 yards.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
So that's tough, but he's still a top 10 wide receiver, as is Davante Adams, who came in at number 8, our second Green Bay Packer at 209.2 points. Davante Adams, who was a massive disappointment in 2015, a lot of drop passes, missed opportunities in the absence of Jordy Nelson. But with Jordy Nelson fully healthy, Davante Adams shines.
I agree.
You have nothing to add.
Yeah.
I like it a lot. At number 9 is Doug Baldwin, a guy that most people thought was a fluke after 2015, and he finished number 7 at 231.9 last season. This season he finished 9th at 208.1. So bit of a regression. That's a tough word to say. Bit of a regression. Certainly to be expected, but not to the level that most people thought. And, I'm glad I was on board with Doug Baldwin.
I was not. I was more on board with Russell Wilson than I was Doug Baldwin.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just he just proved you wrong. Or not specifically, but
I took him in most of my leagues.
Yeah, he just proves people wrong that, look, at the end of the day, the top 10 wide receivers are typically the top 10 wide receivers year after year after year.
At number 10, a very talented rookie, our second New Orleans Saint off the board, Michael Thomas, 207.7 fantasy points in half PPR scoring. Michael Thomas is a guy that I don't know if we know the contract situation of Brandon Cooks right now, but I will say that if I'm early to mid-second round probably next season, I'm looking to pull the trigger on Michael Thomas.
It's likely going to happen. The only thing that I would watch through the offseason is who gets named to that head coaching job.
You don't think Sean Payton's going to be back?
No, he's going to coach the Rams.
Wow, really?
Yeah.
That's one of the oddest predictions I've heard yet.
He's going to coach the Rams. If the offensive coordinator gets promoted to the head coach, I will pull the trigger on Michael Thomas early.
Okay.
But if it's somebody from outside with an old Drew Brees who's maybe has a year or two left.
You keep saying that.
Yikes.
You're going to be that guy, aren't you? I'm on board with Drew Brees. I'm always going to be on board with Drew Brees.
But if they come in and it's a new guy and it's his team and he's looking at the future and not looking at Drew Brees, and he starts changing everything, man, you can't teach an old dog new tricks.
Trade Drew Brees to the Minnesota Vikings, please.
Well, that might happen.
That would be a dream come true for a guy like me. And, would fit the profile, too, because the Vikings typically did that for so many years.
Well, you don't have any draft picks to trade.
Between Randall Cunningham, Jeff George, even Jim McMahon, all these, washed-up guys. Brett Favre, back in 2009, out of nowhere, and came in and almost took him to a Super Bowl. How about that? Maybe Drew Brees can be a Viking.
I miss Culpepper.
Dante Culpepper was the goods.
He was a Lion too.
He was actually the rare drafted quarterback for the Vikings, where they actually took a draft pick. And he was a Lion there for a bit, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Or the number 8 for Detroit.
He was at the beginning of Matt Stafford's career.
At number 11, Michael Crabtree, 194.8. And at number 12, his teammate Amari Cooper at 190.9. These two, you never knew week to week who it was going to be. I did see I did see how.
I told you every single week, pick Crabtree over Cooper every single time.
Do you want to know why? Because he was more consistently targeted, especially down in the red zone.
Absolutely.
That's where most of his touchdowns were scored.
Yep.
I don't think he had many, if any, long touchdowns this year. Amari Cooper was the home run hitter on this team.
Yeah, there was a stat there that I think we both seen.
On Twitter.
It was Cooper's touchdowns were all 20-plus yards.
Yes, and Crabtree's were 2, 2, 2, 6, 2, 2, 4, 1, 3, 3, 2.
Absolutely.
Pretty crazy stat, man. I saw that.
That's why I won't touch Amari Cooper.
But he was a top 12 wide receiver, Brian.
I'll take Crabtree 4 rounds later.
So we had 2 Packers. We had
2 Saints.
2 Saints and 2 Raiders in the top 12. That's half of the top 12 are teammates on the same team.
Incredible.
Well, think about that going into next year's draft. Breaking down the tight end position next. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Stay put. You are listening to the 515 Fantasy Football Show. One final episode here in 2017. Well, that's not exactly true, is it? Because we'll be back in August.
Ha!
Happy New Year!
Whoops.
Yeah. Well, it's the final.
Stupid calendar.
It's the final episode for this season. Okay.
Yeah, the 2016/17 football season.
Thank you, Brian. Maybe I should have had you lead into that segment, right?
Jesus.
Because I totally blew it.
Who's the broadcaster here?
Oh, stop that! Not perfect. Anyway, we invite you to befriend us on Facebook. Like us at 515 Fantasy Football. We're at 515 Fantasy on Twitter, at Andy Hall Radio, at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. Jesus, you'd think this is the first time I've ever done this.
Woo!
And it's the last one of the
23
season.
we should have stopped at 22.
I should have started drinking earlier. We have been breaking down all the positions here, the final stats and everything. We've gotten to the tight end position now, and we begin with the number 1 scoring tight end in half PPR leagues. Who do you suppose it was, Brian?
Number 1 scoring tight end.
This might surprise you.
Delaney Walker.
No. Keep trying.
Travis Kelce.
Travis Kelce. Ding, ding.
It didn't take me long. It was one of those guys.
The number 1 scoring tight end.
Well, honestly, he's got to be like one of the top 20 receivers, right?
No.
You don't think so?
182 points in half PPR leagues. Actually, tight ends, it was a down year for tight ends. Considering Rob Gronkowski was up in the 220s past 2 seasons.
Yeah, his touchdowns were low, but he had 1,100 yards.
Which is pretty awesome for a tight end.
That's crazy for a tight end.
He got targeted a lot this season. It was certainly not the Jeremy Maclin show there in Kansas City. Travis Kelce here, top scoring tight end in fantasy leagues and half PPR scoring.
Nobody's seen that coming.
No, nobody at all. Most people would have predicted, rightly so, Rob Gronkowski headed into the season, but he was marred by all sorts of injuries all season long, basically. He was never truly healthy.
He's on my do not draft list anymore.
Is that right?
Rob is too strong for his own good, and he hurts himself.
I see.
Period.
Coming in at number 2 in the tight end position in half PPR leagues was Greg Olson at 168.3, a guy that will never wow you week to week. He'll have good weeks, and then he'll have even better good weeks, and then he'll have slightly less good weeks. But they're all good weeks for Greg Olson, and this guy never gets hurt. He's always on the field.
Yeah. He hasn't missed a game in like 10 years or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, you want a guy that you can count on. It's Greg Olson.
And that's ultimately at the tight end position. You're not looking for home runs. You want someone who's going to give you a steady dose of points that you can count on.
If you want a guy next year, I'm telling you, Greg Olson finished number 5 in fantasy scoring at the tight end position last year. He finished number 4 back in 2014. He scored about the same amount of points every single time. Check this out. 2014, 178.8. 2015, 187.9. This year, 168.3.
So he was +9, then lower 9. So perfect.
Like I said, it was kind of a down year for tight end scoring, I noticed here. Number 3, this is going to shock you.
I'm going to guess Kyle Rudolph.
How did you know that?
Because I owned him.
Jeez. Kyle Rudolph of the Minnesota Vikings finishes number 3 in all tight ends with 167.5. So he was right on the doorstep of Greg Olson there at number 2, surprisingly. But, hey, when the Vikings needed a guy in that passing game, they more often than not,
nailed him, man.
they went to Kyle Rudolph,
especially
especially
stud games.
in the red zone. There were no more bankable tight end this year.
Well, and
Kyle
that was
Rudolph.
the thing. So in that one league, I owned Jordan Reed and Kyle Rudolph, and I was at the point where I was starting Kyle Rudolph over Jordan Reed.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Because of the injuries for Jordan Reed, most certainly. Coming in at number 4 was Delaney Walker.
Really?
Oh, yes.
I was going to guess Zach Ertz.
Mr. Consistency, Delaney Walker. He's a guy that I've been telling you about for the 2 years we've been doing this show. And if you've been a friend of mine and known anything about my fantasy prowess over the past few years, Delaney Walker's been a part of it because nobody talks about the guy, but he's a stud. There you have it. And now he's got, Marcus Mariota there and more weapons to work with. And I think things are going to continue to look up.
I think so, yeah.
Delaney.
There's no one challenging him for that job.
Jimmy Graham finishes number 5, 154.8, right behind Delaney Walker. Jimmy Graham was pretty quiet for a portion of the season. But when he came on, man, he really came on. And finally, for some reason, the Seahawks waited this long to make him a steady option in the passing game. And look what happened.
Yeah.
He finished number 5 at the tight end position. Pretty amazing. Number 6 was your boy Zach Ertz at 144.6. Now here's an example of a guy that does nothing the first 12 weeks of the season.
Oh, man, he went bonkers.
Pick him up after week 12. You got yourself the dynamite, most number 1 tight end of all leagues.
Yeah, I agree.
Whatever that means. But Zach Ertz is a stud in the final few weeks of every single season. It just seems to be the case. Cameron Brate came in at number 7.
Oh, man, I was going to guess Martellus Bennett.
I thought you were going to go with Austin Seferian-Jenkins.
Ooh, maybe.
That's your boy right there. But, sometimes when opportunity presents itself, a guy like Cameron Brate can come out and shine in that offense.
Well, and he always had, but then ASJ would always get bumping right back down just because of name recognition.
He scored 142.5, just a couple of points behind Zach Ertz, and just a couple of points behind Cameron Brate was our number 8 tight end, Martellus Bennett.
Yeah, 7 touchdowns, man.
140.6, and a lot of that due to those touchdowns, certainly. Now, here's the problem with Bennett. Even if Gronk is going to be a guy that's going to become expendable eventually for New England, they really like him.
I think that's time's coming.
I think so, too. But I think Bennett is going to be around for a while. The problem with Bennett is that he's such a good blocker that they don't want to send him out on pass routes because he's in there protecting Tom Brady.
I don't know. He can catch the ball.
He's an elite blocker, too. That's all I'm saying.
I do think Gronkowski's time is coming to an end.
That could very well be a situation worth keeping an eye on. A guy most people figured would be in the top 3 at the tight end position if he could stay healthy is Jordan Reed. Jordan finished at number 9, 134.6 fantasy points in half PPR leagues. Marred by injury, especially at the end of the season. Fantasy owners like myself were taking a chance on him near the end, and it did not pay off. Did not pay off at all. That number 10 was Dennis Pitta, 124.9. Now, Dennis Pitta didn't exactly light the fantasy world on fire with his touchdown numbers. I think he only scored 1 all season. But he was a guy that was looking at double-digit targets in a lot of games.
Yeah, he had 86 receptions, so spread that out over 16 games, and voila.
And in half PPR leagues, man, you're getting some credit for those receptions. So he's a guy that Joe Flacco will continue to look to, and until these young wide receivers in Baltimore start to develop a little more.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, Steve Smith's gone now.
Yep.
Again for the 3rd time.
So who's it going to be? Kamar Aiken? Is it going to be Brashad Perryman?
I think it's Brashad. He had some flashes, so hopefully he gets his – because this technically was his rookie year because he didn't actually play his rookie year. So
that's true.
This was technically his rookie season, so now it's time to step it up and tackle that learning curve. So then it'll be Wallace and Perriman. And
will Mike Wallace be around for another year?
Yeah.
That's a question.
What else they got?
They don't. That's the point.
Exactly.
They have Dennis Pitta. At number 11.
Ebron, baby.
Antonio Gates.
Ah, man.
120.3. Now, Antonio Gates, what a story this turned out to be.
So, I was watching that game.
And Hunter Henry, did he not score?
He scored that touchdown, and Phillip Rivers turned to the bench, and he kind of put his hands up and he said, "I'm sorry."
He was trying to get Gates the ball.
He was, 100%.
And they were just double covering him.
He was just so wide open, he had to throw it when Gates was not on the field at that play, and he looked right at him and just said, "I'm sorry."
Yep. I have a feeling Gates will be back next season. It might not be with the Chargers.
It won't be with the Chargers. This is going to be a Tony Gonzalez thing where he goes to another team, breaks a record, then comes back home to retire.
That's exactly what I'm thinking.
But it's not going to be in San Diego. It's going to be the Los Angeles Chargers.
But if it had been one of those things where, we all going into this season figured there's no way he's not getting this record. So you can count on Rivers getting
he only needed 8 so you're
touchdowns.
Like, he's going to get it in 3 weeks.
He's gonna have that at least. So a lot of people, myself included, were targeting Gates. And the problem was we started to see this Hunter Henry guy on the field more often. And we're all going like, what are they doing? First of all, rookie tight ends cannot be trusted. That's a fact of life in fantasy football. But look at what Hunter Henry did this season in sniping all those touchdowns away from Antonio Gates. Pew, pew. He didn't finish in the top 12, though. At number 12 this season was Jason Witten. And Jason Witten probably wouldn't have been in the top 12 had it not been for that amazing week that I called, by the way.
Yeah, the 1 week.
Over 100 yards and
some dudes busting
touchdown.
my chops on Twitter like, you see? It's like, 1 week out of 16 does not cut it.
But I was there to call that, wasn't I? In case, because I mean,
Whatever.
I guarantee. How's this? Jason Winton probably sat on the waiver wire most years for most league, or most of the year this year for most leagues.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But he finishes number 12. He finishes as a tight end 1 in half PPR.
Because of one game.
It's amazing. No, it's not just because of one game, but he certainly did have some down weeks. There's no question about that. Now that we're through those positions, I think what we'll do next, Brian, is a mock draft. Let's look ahead.
How come you didn't talk about kickers?
Oh, God.
How many indoor kickers were on the top 10?
Can we stop talking about kickers now?
No.
There's a reason I don't cover kickers, and there's a reason I don't cover DSTs on this show.
That's offensive.
Volatile. Way too volatile.
I am all about diversity and inclusion. Therefore,
All right.
kickers
How's
and
this? Here's
defense.
my only thing I'm going to say about kickers. Take Justin Tucker next year. Okay?
Yeah.
Mock draft coming next on the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Our number 2 of the final episode of the season for 515 Fantasy Football. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. We can't thank you enough for spending your season with us, even if it was just a little bit. I don't know about you, Brian, but I've been inundated by tweets, by Facebook messages, by conversations I've had with people that have won championships this season, and they said it was because of us.
I love it. I'm glad somebody else won something off of my skull rather than me.
Yeah, I know, right? Well, it's funny because, we're typically the two of us, this is not us just bragging here. This is like truth. I mean, we've been playing for a combined over 40 years, okay? We know what we're doing. Typically, we're right up there every single year. In the playoffs, most certainly, unless something crazy happens like happened to me in your commission league this year, all those injuries. But, that said, we're competitive each and every year. And it's just a matter of getting hot at the right time, making the right moves.
100%.
Yeah, I mean, that's the name of the game in winning fantasy championships. And certainly our advice can help you get there, especially late in the game. Guys are looking to make these moves. If you have a Week 17 championship game, for example, I mean, there's some insight we can give you as to how teams are going to, roll out their offenses and what sorts of players have a chance to shine in odd weeks like that. We give you that sort of advice. So anyway, just a heartfelt thank you for sticking with us all season long and heeding our advice and letting us know, when we were right and when we were wrong.
And when we were wrong.
Yeah, because, I mean, we're not perfect, so it certainly did happen once in a while,
Pretty
but
close to perfect.
pretty close, yeah, I would say,
Mhm.
for sure.
Yeah.
What I want to do here, first, want to thank our radio home, 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa. Of course, you can get the show on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com as well. We'll get that out of the way. And bring on a mock draft. Now, I haven't heard too many people looking ahead to August already. Things can happen, certainly. We'll see what happens at the NFL draft, for example, this spring. That might change some
Mel
things.
Kiper probably has done a mock draft.
Yeah, well, he might have. But it won't be nearly as good as ours. So,
That's right.
Mock Draft 1.0, 2017. Happy New Year, friends. Let's start with pick number 1. Brian, I'm going to go ahead and yield to you, my friend. Who do you take?
I will take David Johnson.
And I figured that would be the case. So you take David Johnson. I definitely take Le'Veon Bell at number 2. Look at this already. 2 picks, 2 running backs. This was not the case going into last season's draft.
Well, now I'm going to pull Antonio Brown.
That is a perfect pick at number 3. Antonio Brown, that is exactly where I would have taken him as well. I like Big Ben there for another season or more. I think there's some longevity there, the offensive line. That Pittsburgh team, man, they're so well built. If they can just get their defense back.
If their defense would come back, they would be running the table.
I'm taking Zeke at number 4.
Yep.
Ezekiel Elliott, your 4th pick. I mean, what can you say about this guy that hasn't already been said, Brian? I mean,
Nothing.
we're talking about
Nothing.
just sheer dominance.
Every doubter has just eaten their own shoe, man. Just chowed that thing down.
Glad you said shoe. I thought it was going to be a different SH. All right. So I took Ezekiel Elliott at number 4.
I'm going to back it right in with OBJ.
Yep, that's exactly what I would have done. Okay, number 6. I got some options here. But if I'm at the 6th pick, I'm going to go ahead and take Mike Evans with that 6th pick.
See, the thing that Mike Evans, I wouldn't pull him in the first round. People will.
Oh, why not? He won't be there if you try to wait.
Well, the thing is
what is there not to love about Mike Evans?
if they get a decent number 2, I think it's going to hurt Mike Evans.
No.
Jameis Winston isn't ready for the big time yet.
I beg to differ, and we'll have that conversation a little later on in the show. You know what? It is not a 515 fantasy football show without some arguments between Brian and myself. So we will get into that eventually.
Then you can just go ahead and give me T.Y. Hilton next.
You like T.Y.?
Yep. I'm off the running
number
back.
7. There's a couple guys I would have taken ahead of Hilton here, and one of them is Julio Jones, and that's who I'm taking at 8. I like Julio there. Considering Matt Ryan did what he did, and I think could do it again, considering the defenses he faces in that division. That's part of why Atlanta succeeded so well this year, is the garbage defenses they get to face in their division. No question. So I took Julio at number 8. Who do you take at number 9? There's a lot of talent out there, man.
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to go.
It's only a 2-hour show, bro.
Yeah, I think this is where I'm going to get crazy and just say Michael Thomas right now.
Michael Thomas. I like it. I like that pick, Brian.
Well, you should.
That's gutsy.
No, it's not gutsy.
It is gutsy. You're taking that.
It's like 6'5".
I dig that guy. Michael Thomas. Listen, Brandon.
He could be. I'll say this. He could be the next Megatron.
He could be. Brandon Cooks finished ahead of him, but he won't next year.
No, Michael Thomas didn't play for the first few games, didn't he?
I promise Michael Thomas will finish ahead of Brandon Cooks next year. My first call of 2017, 2018.
Yeah, absolutely.
Michael Thomas will finish ahead of Brandon Cooks. There you go. All right, so Michael Thomas, I like that, but I like LaShawn McCoy a lot better before I get to the end of that first round. So that was the 10th pick. That, that offensive scheme, that offensive line, which performed above expectations this year, in my opinion, and that workload of LaShawn McCoy's, again, it just becomes a case of can he stay healthy? Who do you take at 11?
Man, so if I'm on the turn here, I'm looking at going running back, wide receiver. So I may pull the trigger on a Jordan Howard at this point.
Okay.
Just because, based off of last performance, I don't think what's his face? I can't remember the guy anymore. Langford.
Jeremy Langford.
Yeah, he's gone.
He's
John
done.
Fox is done. He's moved on. There's only 2 people that make up that Bears team right now for points, and that's Alshon Jeffrey and Cameron Meredith.
It's the renaissance of the workhorse back.
Yeah, 100%.
Jordan Howard, Jay Ajayi, Isaiah Crowell, Le'Veon Bell. I mean, there's a number
David
of guys.
Johnson.
There are more bell cows and workhorse backs now than there was 3 years ago.
Yeah, totally.
Isn't that crazy?
Totally.
There were so many running back by committees a few years ago.
So why though? Why? Why is the pendulum swinging back earlier than expected?
That's such a good question.
So here's my thoughts.
I don't know. What is it?
I think that people seen the reemergence of quarterback and wide receiver value. So teams were focusing their draft picks and their efforts into defensive backs, which left a kind of a soft linebacker core. And now teams are saying, oh, wow, we can actually run the ball because they beefed up their secondary so much. Because how many stud corners can you name and safeties can you name off the top of your head? None? Oh, I can go down.
I mean, I'm not saying none. I'm just thinking to myself.
You can do a lot. You can do a lot.
There's a pretty sizable handful.
Now,
actually.
what about linebackers this year? See?
Yeah,
That's my point.
Not nearly as much.
There's like, oh, my God, this team's linebackers are unbelievable. And then my buddy Ryan's be like, are you kidding me? I tell you every week Tampa's linebackers are awesome.
Tampa homers in Iowa.
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? All right, so at the 12 here, we got to hurry this up.
Okay, I guess it's a 1-round mock.
No, it's going to be 2. Oh, I would be thrilled to have Jordy Nelson here at the tail end of the first round. so I'll take him.
Okay, you got to pick again.
First pick of the second round. I will pick first, and I will take, let's take Devonte Freeman there. I like that.
Okay, so then coming back,
2-2.
I will be more than happy to grab Melvin Gordon.
There's Melvin Gordon at 2-2. 2-3, I'm going to go with, God, we were just talking about the workhorse back, so I'm going to go Ajayi there at 2-3.
Give me Cooper.
You want Amari Cooper there at 4? All right, at 5, I will go, do you know how badly I want to take Tyreek Hill right here?
Whoa.
I mean, he's a guy that I just think I'm going to have to reach for if I want to get him.
He's going to be in the 4th or 5th round.
Probably, but I feel like I have to reach to get him, though. I'm going to take Legarrette Blunt here. I mean, in middle of the second round, and I get a guy that scored nearly 20 touchdowns. I mean, come on.
Well, I think the majority of his touchdowns were because Gronk wasn't there, so I'm going to take Gronk now.
So even though you just said you're not going to
well, yeah, this isn't my team.
Gronk.
There's no money on this one.
I like Davante Adams at 2-7. How about you at 8?
I could push for Lamar Miller here.
Okay. I like that pick. Lamar Miller. Okay, for me, boy, I don't know. Doug Baldwin, how's that?
I got a whole bunch right now. Give me Golden Tate then.
Golden Tate, 2-11. I'm going to go, you know what? Let's give DeMarco Murray another shot. 2-12. Final pick.
Give me Demaryius Thomas.
Demaryius Thomas. Comeback trail. Who's going to quarterback, though? Who's going to be the QB in Denver?
Tony Romo.
Wow.
No, I think he's going to Arizona.
Okay. We'll see what happens. That was our mock. That was fun.
Felt dirty.
Come on.
I like feeling dirty, though.
All right, a segment called On the Cusp coming your way next, the final show of the 2016-2017 season. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Down to our final few segments of the season. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at espndesmoines.com. No matter how you found us and had found us all season long, Brian and I thank you very much for listening to our little program. In its second season, looking forward to year number 3 and building some relationships that we created and earned here in the second year. And, boy, bigger and better things are still ahead. And as of yet, Brian has not shared with us any secrets, so I'm not sure we're going to get to that, are we?
Yeah, we are. We have a lot of time
some secrets?
left. Maybe.
Okay, Brian, there are people that are literally hanging on your every single word as to what this secret is. I don't.
Let's.
Is it just one thing, or can you tell me?
Well, let's give a hint, and that hint will be league.
Okay, I like it. It is something we have discussed on the program.
Oh, and if you just missed it, you're gonna have to hit rewind.
Oh boy, that's okay though, because you don't mind listening over and over and over again.
We've got more stuff coming.
So this segment here, I want to talk about players that are on the cusp. These are guys that performed this season, but are guys that you should target early next season because they are going to have big explosion in 2017, 2018.
Yes.
You understand what on the cusp is, correct?
Oh, yeah. You have me at big explosion.
Let's start at the quarterback position. A guy I think is on the cusp, and you may disagree, and this is where some of the fights are going to happen probably, but Jameis Winston, Tampa Bay. On the cusp, buddy.
Yeah. No, I'll go with on the cusp. That's fine. He gets too aggressive and tries to force it, and every time he does, it's an interception. Every time.
Don't you think, though, that he'll further straighten these little things out that need straightening?
It's third year.
It is. But remember how his rookie season started, okay? And then realize Jameis Winston, with the weapons he's got, now it's going to look a little different next year in Tampa.
You know, Dougie Fresh is out the door.
I think Doug Martin's done. I think Jacquizz Rodgers is your new feature back. Charles Sims,
intriguing.
Charles Sims continues to be a compliment to that in the passing game, most certainly. And then you have Mike Evans. You have Cameron Brate. You got a bunch of other dudes. I don't know. Maybe something in free agency. Maybe NFL draft. But, I mean, as it is, Jameis Winston finished 17 at the quarterback position this season. So a mid-tier quarterback, too. He scored over 300 fantasy points. He was the 19th overall fantasy player. And, by any, measure, I'm looking at his totals week to week, and they're pretty consistent, Brian. I kind of like that consistency out of Jameis Winston.
All right. Well, you can. I think my on the cusp player is a little bit more on the cusp, but I think this offseason will give him the opportunity to really excel as someone's backup quarterback that's undrafted.
Ooh, okay. I was going to say, maybe this is the other quarterback I put on my on the cusp list.
Carson Wentz.
Carson Wentz. No, that's interesting, though.
So if you think about how he started off, slow, easy, making good decisions
scoring a lot of points, though.
Yeah, he did. He had 16 touchdowns, which wasn't great. He had 3,700 yards. He turned the ball over a lot the second half of the season, and that's because they had pressure, playoff push. Some of their people weren't there. The wide receiver core just really kind of fell apart on him. So what Carson Wentz was doing, he was doing with scrubs.
Do you remember he didn't have a turnover for the first 3 weeks of the season?
Yeah. So I think this offseason we've kind of alluded to Deshaun Jackson going home to Philly, things like that.
Jordan Matthews will still be there.
With a good draft, they need some offensive line help. I definitely think Carson Wentz is somebody who you might pull in the last round as your backup quarterback, expecting that could have the possibility to really blow up in your favor.
The other quarterback I will mention here as on the cusp is a guy I think will be an easy QB1 next season, and that's
Mariota?
Marcus Mariota for sure. He finished at number 15 at the quarterback position this season, 17 overall. And, I mean, this is a guy that not only has some real interesting weapons at his disposal, he's also a dual threat guy that can run the ball, score some touchdowns with his legs, and looked incredibly stout in his second season throwing the ball.
Could you imagine if they had a really good wide receiver?
I mean, the best they had this season was Rashard Matthews.
Yeah,
he's a pretty good receiver, but he's not a great receiver.
Yeah, he's not a number one wide receiver.
Right. If they had a true number one, like a Mike Evans or something,
a big guy, they need a big dude.
Mike Evans.
Well, I think
a guy like that.
I think in their draft they're going to go weapon heavy.
They tried the big guy thing with Dorial Green-Beckham.
Well,
that didn't work.
That didn't work. It isn't working for nobody. Hey,
right.
Bust or bust. Trust me, I'm a Detroit fan. Wide receiver bust. I get it.
Yeah,
been there.
You've done
Roy
a lot of
Williams,
those.
Charles Rodgers.
Oh man,
got it.
Mike Williams.
Yeah.
Oh jeez.
Been there, done that, pal.
Oh man.
I think they're going to load up on skill positions for him. You have to. You have to give him the weapons necessary.
Yeah, it seems like their offensive line's in pretty good shape. If they can just keep everybody together and healthy, that could turn out pretty good for Marcus Mariota. Any other quarterbacks you want to mention, or should we move on to
move on
to the running back position? Who do you want to mention right off the top?
As a joke, who could Gurley be determined as on the cusp?
Boy,
that sucks.
We haven't spent any time talking about Todd Gurley during this show.
Yuck.
And
we don't need to.
We're not going to, because he is, by all measures, a bust. So
some of my on the cusp
let's start with the first one first.
Yeah, so my first one, and it's not, people are going to be like, huh? Is Bilal Powell.
Yes.
100%, man.
He
is going to fly under the radar on so many people's stuff.
Yes.
Forte's done. Time caught up with him. He's out the door. There's nobody left. They're going to draft somebody probably, and they're going to be behind Bilal Powell.
What in the hell were the Jets thinking in terms of their running back usage early in the season? Powell had virtually no involvement.
Yeah.
And then you finally give him the ball in the last few weeks of the season. What does he do?
He's the best running back over the last 3 weeks.
Running over people. I was talking about Bilal Powell back in the preseason as a guy you should absolutely 100% grab in the late rounds.
Yep.
He is a guy you should own.
And
if you stuck with him all season long through all the frustration of the New York Jets coaching staff just totally screwing this up, if you stuck with it, he might have won you a championship this season.
Yeah, I think he really displayed his value and what's going to happen, and he's going to be the number one back that people are going to be snoozing on and you're gonna look like a fool when you pull him in like the 6th round. Everyone's gonna laugh at you for drafting a Jet, and then they're at halfway through the season be like, "Ooh, should have pulled him. Had the opportunity."
The first one I will mention for on the cusp at the running back position is a guy who ran for over 200 yards in 3 separate games this season, twice against the Buffalo Bills, Ajayi of the Miami Dolphins. Because, for one, who else do they have in the backfield there? Number 2, he's clearly a workhorse guy that they can give 25 or more touches to in a game and not worry about breaking down. He's got the speed. He's got the toughness. What is there not to like about Ajayi, in your opinion, Brian, as an on-the-cusp type of player?
It's not a very good team.
Okay.
I guess.
So there's that.
But there's the Jets. I mean, they're terrible. I don't know. I've just never been an Ajayi fan, and I think it's because a bulk of his production came from 3 or 4 games. And that's what makes me pump the brakes.
Yeah, but,
I just have. Well, I mean, but this is on the cusp, so we'll see.
It's true.
But I'm going to pump them brakes.
Anybody else you want to mention?
On the cusp of being something real big is Kenneth Dixon for the Baltimore Ravens.
I like that a lot.
That dude's going to go nuts next year. Mark my words. And one more.
Yes.
Latavius Murray.
Really?
I'm sorry.
I don't trust that backfield.
Latavius Murray will not be with the Raiders next year.
Okay, good.
And he is going to go somebody where he is warmed, welcomed, and used appropriately, probably the Denver freaking Broncos.
I have a couple of guys I want to mention real quick before we move on. One of them is probably not an obvious pick for most people. CJ Procise, Seattle.
You think Rawls is done?
I think Rawls is a flash in the pan. I don't think he got what it takes to last an entire season, and CJ Procise really showed me something when he was healthy.
Yeah.
So I'd like to mention him, and Jacquizz Rodgers we've already mentioned. I think he's going to get that opportunity in Tampa. So
yeah, I do. It'll be fun to see kind of the running back shuffle here and see where some of these guys land. Because, like I said, I think imagine Latavius Murray going to Denver now, going to a divisional opponent. They just let him go.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's going to be sweet.
It's an interesting call on your part. Real quick, wide receiver position. Anybody of note?
Big breakouts, big cusps. I will say someone like Terrell Pryor, I think, because he's a free agent. He had 1,000 yards. He was averaging just over 13 per catch. So he's someone who I think is a free agent. He could go to a healthy team and be a legit contender number 2 and put up some good, be a stud. Thielen, I guess, too.
Thielen, I like Adam Thielen out of Minnesota. Tyreek Hill. As long as he remains a wide receiver eligible, he's a guy you have to mention here. This guy scores. It's what he does. And Cameron Meredith, one of my favorite picks of yours from the course of the season.
Sweet.
That Chicago offense might be without Alshon Jeffrey. And if that's the case, Cameron Meredith, we've seen what he can do, and he's given that number 1 role. Not sure there's anybody at the tight end position I care to mention here for on the cusp. It's kind of one of those positions where, as long as you end up with one of the top 12 guys, I think you're okay. So, no offense to the tight end fans out there, but we do have to get to one of our final 2 segments here, which is the Postseason Awards. We'll do that next. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. The 515 Fantasy Football Show, heard each and every Thursday during the season on 1350 AM ESPN Radio, Des Moines, Iowa. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher, and online at ESPNDesMoines.com. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eichenberry. Brian, we've had lots of people asking the question, when will we have a 515 Fantasy Football Listener League?
In 7 months, chumps.
It's going to happen, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep.
Next season, we will have a Listener League. Brian and I will co-own one of the teams. We have yet to determine, by the way, how big we want our league to be, 12, 14, whatever. I think it's got to be at least 12, right?
Yeah, I think 12 is a nice starting point. We'll leg wrestle for that.
And I think we also need to involve our listeners as to how this league should be. Should it be a standard league? Should it be a half PPR, full PPR? What do you want to do? How do you want to compose the actual rosters?
Person who donates the most and makes the best snacks gets to pick the rules.
I like it a lot. So, yeah, we're going to be in touch with you via Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, Twitter, at 515 Fantasy, throughout the course of this offseason, and we will keep you in the loop as to how the Listener League will go.
Off-season does not mean we are off. We are out there. We are here. We are there. We are everywhere. There will be things this off-season that you're going to want to stay in tune for because we are going to be asking for input. We are going to be talking. NFL Draft, we're going to be talking. We might do some pop-up shows one-off, so that's a good opportunity to head out to iTunes, Stitcher, and subscribe.
Because then you'll automatically have it, whereas if you're not a subscriber, then you would actually physically have to go to our page and see if we have any new episodes, and then from there you'd have to listen.
Right.
It's a lot easier.
So if you subscribe, it's going to hit your feed, and you're going to know it's there. And then when you wake up from your beauty sleep and you're stretching out and you're all sad, you can go, oh, wow, 515.
Imagine what a surprise it'll be when you just got done watching day one of the NFL Draft, and you wake up the next morning and maybe there will be a new episode of Brian and I talking about the NFL Draft live as it's happening.
Yeah.
That'd be an idea for a show, wouldn't it? I like that. Okay. Anyway, yeah, here we are brainstorming on the show. We also will be doing plenty of that brainstorming via social media with you because, like I have been saying all season and all throughout the course of this show over its 2 seasons, it's not just about us. It's about you guys, too. I mean, what do you like? How do you want this show to be in its 3rd season upcoming? How do you want this Listener League to go? We want your input because it matters to us. So please do keep in touch. Subscribe on iTunes. Rate and review the show if you have some time. It helps our visibility out. It helps people find us. And
it makes me feel good about myself.
And it won't hurt your chances of making it into that Listener League.
That's true.
Because we know those of you by name that have been with us since the very beginning, and it is folks like you that'll have a pretty good crack at one of those spots in the league. Let me just tell you.
Yeah. If you're bad at making snacks, you better be good at reviewing things.
There's lots of time in the off season here to practice the snack part.
Yeah.
You can make things.
And you can just buy things, too. That's okay.
Yeah, I cheat. That's fine. And just tell us.
Andy needs an NES Classic.
Oh, you. We haven't gotten to the flea flicker yet. That'll be our final segment. And by the way, the final segment is a flea flicker in its entirety. So we get a whole segment to talk about whatever we want to wrap up this season. But first, let's do some postseason awards, shall we?
Okay.
Go through each of the positions, and we'll give out a trophy, essentially. A virtual trophy.
Virtual, imaginary, peekaboo trophy.
A pat on the ass. How's that?
Yeah, I like that.
Let's start at the quarterback position. Who gets your pat?
I think Matt Ryan does. I really do.
I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be by fantasy points. It can be who was the most valuable to his team or fantasy football.
Yeah,
or
to me,
however you
I
want to do this.
I truly believe Matt Ryan, this is his year to shine. I really believe that. And for those of you who kept saying he was a backup quarterback, he was never a backup quarterback. Matt Ryan's always been one of the top 10 quarterbacks out there for the last 4 years. So I don't want to hear that backup garbage. He never has been. And I think this was his elite status year. Now, we'll see what happens in the playoffs. I'm not a person who, they suck in the playoffs, so he's not a good quarterback. No. Good quarterback is good for 16 weeks, and that's what he did.
Considering what he did with no running.
Just Julio Jones, period?
No. I'm on to my pick now.
Oh.
Considering what he did with no running game to speak of, 2 pass catchers in the top 12 at their position, and the fact that
I thought you were going to do this to Matt Stafford.
And the fact that he ran a handful of touchdowns in, Aaron Rodgers.
This show is canceled.
Aaron Rodgers wins my award for the quarterback position.
Everything's done.
I like Matt Ryan, but let's face it, Aaron Rodgers was the guy this season.
Nope.
And if you had him on your fantasy squad, good for you. On to the running back position. I don't think there should be any question as to who wins the award here.
Blunt was my guy. I had him. I drafted him. Now, you know what? Blunt was my guy just because he was off. But if I had to give a legit trophy just to say, good job, pal, I really want to give it to Melvin Gordon.
Wow, that's an off-the-wall pick.
Yeah. Let's give it to Zeke. Let's give it to David Johnson.
David Johnson.
No, you know what? Good job, Melvin Gordon. Good job proving your team that you are able to handle everything.
I will point you in the direction of weeks 7 and 9 of the regular season this year for Melvin Gordon, in which he scored 33.1 and 34.1 fantasy points and half PPR, respectively. Weeks like that, wow. I mean,
And he didn't play the last 3 weeks of the season.
that's amazing. But when you
Buts.
consider that David Johnson did that in week 5, week 6, week 11, week 13, and week 16, plus 30 points or more.
But everybody expected him to do that.
I don't care.
That's why I'm giving Melvin Gordon my trophy.
That's cool. David Johnson gets mine. Bar none. David Johnson is the winner at the running back position, and there's no argument about that. At the wide receiver position, Brian, who are you giving an award out to?
I don't know. You go first. Let me think.
Mike Evans for sure for me. I mean, I was bragging about him at the midway point and saying, like, wow. I mean, if you just look at, like, the fact that he was on target, on pace for potentially 200 targets on the season, and the fact that, you know, he was a guy who had some problems with drops and some other issues early on in his career. Seems to have ironed all that out now. The guy scored every week pretty much. I mean, it felt like you plugged him into your lineup and you could just count on the guy.
Okay, so I made my decision.
At the wide receiver position,
Michael Thomas.
I like it.
To be a rookie to be in the what, top 10?
He was number 10.
So to be a rookie, to be in the top 10 on a team that has another wide receiver in the top 10 and have over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns, you get my trophy, pal.
Imagine what could have been if he had not sat out week 14 or scored a 0 in week 10.
Yeah. So just give him 160 yards then to cover those 2 and 1 touchdown. That means he has 10 touchdowns and he has 1,300 yards.
I made the call earlier in the show when we were doing our wide receiver breakdown, I believe is when I made the prediction. But I said, or no, it was during the mock draft, wasn't it? When I said Michael Thomas will outscore Brandon Cooks next season. And that will happen. At the tight end position, Brian, who gets a trophy?
Nobody.
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 Wow. Why?
Nobody. You know what? I'll give one to Rudolph just because he was another guy that he was likely undrafted in your fantasy football league. If you had a 12 team and you had to take if you want to have one that doesn't have tight ends, he was not drafted at all, period. But if you have required a tight end shy of any Minnesota Vikings actual fans, because in tight ends, people tend to pick their own tight end. So if you didn't have any Vikings fans, I guarantee you he was undrafted, and Kyle Rudolph was the number 3. So, yeah.
Pretty amazing. I think because he never is a trophy guy, but he's a guy that you can just count on year after year after year after year.
Greg Olson.
Greg Olson finally gets his moment. I give Greg Olson my trophy this year at the tight end position. Mr. Consistent, and he's tough as nails. Dude never misses a game.
No, and he's a family guy, too.
I like that about him. All right. Now,
kicker trophies?
We are going to talk about kickers.
Ah, yes.
Okay. I'm a former kicker. I don't know if people realize that.
Yeah, you brag about it all the time.
No, I do not. I brag about the fact I can still kick a 50-yard field goal. Kicker position. I alluded to him earlier. To me, there is no better kicker in all of fantasy football than Justin Tucker. Doesn't matter how good or bad that Baltimore offense is, the dude is bankable, and boy, can he sing a mean tune.
Maybe. And he does break the format of indoor only.
Yes, he does.
And just as everybody was talking about him breaking the record and, oh, man, he hasn't missed anything, then he shanks one. Too bad.
The top scoring kicker this season in all of fantasy football was Matt Bryant, Atlanta.
Indoors.
He was an indoor kicker. Is that who gets your trophy?
Sure.
I think Tucker deserves it because he had to kick outdoors more often than not.
Yeah. Run down the top 5 kickers real quick.
Matt Bryant, Justin
Indoor.
Tucker,
Outdoor.
Dustin Hopkins, outdoor. Caleb Sturgis, outdoor. Will Lutz indoor. That's a really weird top 5 right there. That's why I never talk about kickers, Brian.
No, I just take them indoors. Go Prater.
That is the awards segment. Next, the 515 Fantasy Flea Flicker. We're going to talk about whatever we want, and that's going to wrap up this season of 515 Fantasy Football. Next, the final segment of season number 2 of the 515 Fantasy Football Show. Been a lot of fun. I'm Andy Hall. That's Brian Eikenberry. Again, a big thanks to everyone that tuned into the show this season. Whether we offered you enough nuggets of knowledge to earn you a fantasy championship or enough to get you into the playoffs for the first time or, whatever positivity we offered this season. We are happy to do it, and we're happy to do it again next season. Again, a reminder to keep in touch with us on our social media, Facebook, 515 Fantasy Football, on Twitter, at 515 Fantasy. I'm at Andy Hall Radio. He's at Ike FFB. That's IKEFFB. Big thanks to 1350 AM ESPN Radio in Des Moines, Iowa for being our radio home. Big thanks to Sleeper Bot for being the greatest app known to man. Big thanks to the Sleeper Wire crew for being so cool and, becoming friends of ours throughout the course of this season. We look forward to further building that relationship as time goes on. Anybody else you want to thank before we get to the Flea Flicker, Bry? I want to thank Ollie real quick for stinking the joint up.
Yeah,
every week.
Ollie's been our comic relief this year. That's always been fun. Your dog just tries to attack me mid-sentence, or he squeaks out some little silent stinkers that just
awful
clobber the entire place. So for the sleepover, Ollie will be present.
Oh, boy.
It'll be great.
Your chance to meet the true rock star of this show. That would be my Shar-Pei, Ollie. Yep. If you don't know what a Shar-Pei is, it's a wrinkled dog. Now you know.
He's aggressive.
He
likes me.
He's in love with Brian.
Uncle Brian comes over to see him, and he likes it.
He
literally waits in the window, looking out on Wednesdays, waiting for Uncle Brian to get there.
Brian gets here. He attacks Brian. It takes at least 10, 15 minutes for the two of you to get reacquainted before we can come to the home studio here in the basement of my house, which is where we record the show from, by the way. Anybody else you want to thank, Brian? I thanked Ollie. Should we thank our wives for putting up with us?
Yeah, that's always fun. Thanks, babe, for staying up super late with 2 kids while I'm frolicking about.
And to my wife for just generally putting up with a huge pain in the ass, which is me.
Yes. The radio station the studio will get broken down now, and you can have some of your basement back. But
yeah, that's true.
For a little while. I like interacting with people this year. It was fun. I did like the best call. So last couple of weeks, I was huge on Cameron Meredith. You have got to take Cameron Meredith. Then he rolls up with like 160 and a touchdown. Made me very happy.
That was a
and
big
to have
call.
people go, dude, you won me the championship.
Isn't that a great feeling?
That's fun.
Even when your team takes a crap in the playoffs and you don't win championships, to hear that some people did because of something you said on the show, and I can think back specifically to things somebody will tell me, and I'll remember exactly where I came up with the idea that, oh, you know what, this guy's going to be a great start this week. You might not think it off the top of your head, but he's going to be a great start, and here's why. And my thought process, I go through my thought process and go, this is exactly how I came up with that conclusion. I'm glad it worked out for you. I mean, that's how it works.
Yeah, I dig it. It's fun. You know what? There are a lot of surprises that we got cooking. There's a lot of ideas. So
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we're not just going to be – you're going to want to stay tuned. You're going to want to stay in touch.
Well, look, we're looking to grow the show exponentially like we did from year 1 to year 2. There were a lot of big improvements to the show. You might not even realize on the listener's side. But from our standpoint, this was a big leap for us this year.
Yeah, we got – new equipment. We graduated from PlayStation 4 headsets to real microphones.
Yeah, we have real mics, which makes a difference in the podcasting world.
So there's lots of cool things coming. We just talked about our listener league that we're going to do. We really want to get in touch with everybody. A potential slumber party in the works.
All right, pal.
I'm super excited about
Long
that.
as you're making the nachos.
We're making one giant sleeping bag. It's going to be great.
Wow.
We're looking at doing just a lot of cool stuff. We're going to need some sweet interns that make awesome snacks.
Yeah, here's the thing about the intern deal. We've sort of mentioned this before. You don't necessarily have to be local. I think a lot of people think you have to be local. By the way, if you didn't know, we're in Des Moines, Iowa. Those of you that are in or near Des Moines are local listeners. Hello.
Snacks mail, Andy.
It'll be easier for you, but certainly if you live in Philadelphia or Boston or Dallas or Seattle or wherever, Minneapolis, if you want to contribute to the show somehow, we've got some things you can help us out with. So,
or even if you have an idea and say, hey, I have an idea for your show.
Yep.
Let me know, because let me tell you a little story.
Let's hear it.
That's how I first became into podcasting, is I listened to a Star Wars podcast called Far, Far Away Radio. And I emailed them and said, it'd be cool for your show. And then I gave a little example of what I thought would be cool if they covered. And I said, you know what? Why don't you do that?
I love that.
And I was like, what? And they're like, yeah, why don't you do that then for us? And then you can contribute. And that's how this journey started 4 years ago.
Wow.
That ended me here.
I'm a huge podcast fan. I listen to a number of podcasts on a pretty regular basis, and none of them are sports related, funny enough. I'm a big true crime guy. Minnesota Public Radio just recently put out a series called In the Dark, which you can find on iTunes and elsewhere. Very well done. Centers around an abduction case, which happened in Minnesota when I was a kid back in the late 80s. A kid by the name of Jacob Wetterling, that you might have recognized that name. That was pretty close to home for me. He was about my age at the time. He kind of looked like me, very strangely. And only recently did we truly find out what happened to Jacob after all these years. And a tragic conclusion, to say the least, but at least it's a conclusion. It's closure for his family and loved ones. But it was a very well done mini-series of podcasts, I think 9 episodes total, about the whole thing and how it was handled. And boy, really well done. In the Dark, if you're looking for something cool in the true crime department. There's lots of Johnny Gosh,
sure,
for local Iowa boy that got taken back in 1982. A lot of that out there. You can hear about the Johnny Gosh case, which is one of the more unique ones.
If you are a Walking Dead fan and you want to hear this sweet, sexy voice,
Brian's on.
I'm on all the time on a podcast called Biters.
That's right.
That's out there on iTunes, Stitchers. We cover Walking Dead pretty in-depth, and Fear the Walking Dead, so we do that in the summertime. We do some off-season content, so that's been out there. That show's been going for a long time, been doing that for a long time, so you can swing out there for that.
And if you're into rock and roll, I am a radio host at a radio station in Des Moines, Iowa, at a rock station called Laser 103.3. And one of the things I like to do most is interview artists. I've talked to everybody from Aaron Lewis to ZZ Top. And I post all of my interviews on my blog page at the Laser website. If you ever want to go take a listen or keep up with that, laser1033.com is that website. And I do appreciate it. We have just a couple of minutes left here, Brian. The Flea Flicker has been a big self-promotion machine here, which is okay.
Yeah, well, it's a fun segment, and we've talked about everything from chips to video games to comfort food to annoying family members to pet peeves about trade etiquette.
That's right.
And
we did.
People pissing me off because they don't respond to trades. They just hit decline. It's like, dude, what are you doing?
Communication.
Like, at least say, no, I'm not interested in trading, or, hey, make me another offer. I'm interested in trading. I just don't want that player.
What are you talking about, Brian? People don't talk to each other anymore.
Trade etiquette, buttholes.
Oh, my God. I'm not sure you can say that on the radio. Boy, it's been a fun season, man. I mean, I think back to the first season, and we had a lot of fun on the first season. we had a lot of fun, but we were also kind of finding our way.
Yeah, also a little known fact, the first season we recorded in remote locations.
Yeah, we were never in the same room together. That's true. This year, pretty much every week we were in the same room. There was one instance I can remember where you were out of town.
There was one instance of the show, if anybody could tell, we recorded one segment in Rochester, New York, one segment in Washington, D.C. airport,
Yes,
and then another one in a hotel room.
Yep. But
All
nobody knew.
all for one episode, just multiple segments in 4 different states.
Sometimes you got to patchwork it together. But bottom line is we've had a lot of fun. We're glad you've been along for the ride. Thank you so much for listening and making this season the success it was. For Brian Eikenberry, I'm Andy Hall. This is the 515 Fantasy Football Show on 1350 AM ESPN Radio. See ya.